I first started thinking about the possibility of becoming a priest, I guess when I was about 12 or so. I never was one of those kids who played Mass in the backyard and gave somebody Necco wafers or anything like that. That wasn't me. But we had a priest at our parish at St. Jude's, Father Carmel Polidano. He came and he brought a little bit of some of his Maltese customs and a real love for the church. Not that other priests hadn't had that, but just his way of doing things was a little bit more old world. And it really interested me, and I became just more interested in the church. And about the time when most people stopped being altar servers, I became an altar server. So he was one of the first people who sort of made me think about that. He started doing more processions at our church, Eucharistic adoration more often, 40 hours. And I think some of those things were in place before, but he would talk about them more, which interested me. And then becoming an altar server, I was asked to serve those special masses and devotions. And that started to get me thinking. Another thing that led to my consideration of priesthood was other people's questions about being Catholic. A lot of people are into apologetics, trying to show people who don't believe in the Catholic Church that the Catholic Church is the true faith. I always found that I was teaching Catholics about their faith. Most of my friends were Catholic growing up, and you'd hear, well, why can't we eat meat on Fridays? Or why do we have to have ashes on our head on Ash Wednesday? To me, it didn't seem like the church would randomly make up rules and regulations. I always wanted to know why the church said what she said. And I found myself looking things up in the catechism, looking things up in scripture, and being able to provide reasons that we did the things that we did as a faith. And that sort of research really intrigued me. When I was a senior in high school, I think I had already decided that I was going into the seminary at that point. But in our history class, we were reading an article about Pope Pius XII. And the exercise was actually to try to find bias in writing. And it was showing an anti-Catholic standpoint in this article. And the teacher said that we were supposed to point out the anti-Catholic bias, but I still didn't think it was right that the only thing we ever learned about a pope in public school was something that was very negative. So later in the year, I took it upon myself. We had to do a project, and I ended up researching Pope Pius XII. And found out all the great things that he did, and really, as is being shown now in the news and in media, how much he did for the Jewish people during the Holocaust and other things like that. And it was that sort of interest that really made me think about the church. I know a lot of people can point to a specific moment of a retreat or a calling. Sometimes when I do vocation talks, I say, well, I was out horseback riding and I got knocked off the horse. And a voice said, Jamie, this is God. Did you get the autographed picture I sent you? And I always explain that it doesn't happen like that. Or at least it didn't happen like that to me. It didn't hurt that the vocation director, now Monsignor Lou Marucci, was the weekend assistant at my parish. So he was always talking about vocations. The assistant vocation director, Sister Dorothy Aloisio, was the organist at the 9 o'clock Mass that my family went to. So And very frequently, she wouldn't let me leave the church until I said I was going to be a priest. I don't think that's the direct reason I went into the seminary, but it didn't hurt. The three priests that were at my parish, Father Carmel Paladano, Monsignor Tom McIntyre, and Father Lou Marucci, they each had a real role to play. I was never a part of a youth group at my church. I was involved in a lot of other extracurricular activities. At school, I was in the plays and did a lot of things. But Monsignor McIntyre started offering high school religious ed, and that really interested me. So once a week, I would go for this and it was more of a Catholic discussion group for teenagers. And I really liked it. So that was one thing. And his wisdom about the church, him telling stories about his time in the seminary in Rome, showing pictures, that was really interesting. Father Carmel and his great devotion, his fiery preaching, and that was one area. And then Father Lou Marucci, he had a beautiful singing voice and would sing parts of the Mass, and showed a great devotion and holiness himself. And all three of them had their own part of inspiration. When I was 16, my family went through a difficult period. Actually, my parents got divorced. And Monsignor McIntyre took a lot of time for my family, for both my mom and my dad. My sister was out of the house by then. And spent a lot of time with me, and I knew that his office was always open. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, who's this guy who's taking such an interest in my family? He's not getting paid to do this. He's doing it out of the kindness of his heart. And I also realized that this is how he was serving God, by serving others. And that had a very strong and lasting impression, left a strong and lasting impression on me. By the time I was 17, 18, I had thought about entering the seminary so frequently that I knew that I had to give it a try. And I remember that someone said to me, you don't enter the seminary because you know that you're going to be a priest. You enter the seminary because you want to see if you're called to be a priest. You don't start dating someone because you're sure that you're going to marry that person. You start dating to see if perhaps you're going to marry that person. So I realized if I finished high school and went to college, there was probably a good chance that I would never make it into the seminary. If I finished high school and went right into the seminary, then if I liked it, I'd stay. If I didn't like it, I would always then know that it was for me. I wouldn't lose any time of college. Credits would transfer. And that way I'd always say, it wasn't for me. So I also did a few retreats going to the seminary, vocation weekends, vocation talks, and did decide to apply to the diocese when I was a senior in high school. And it was actually Father Joe Zolak was the vocation director at that time and accepted me into the seminary when I was 18. And I started in late August, in the fall of the year 2000, right after, a few months after high school graduation. When I decided to apply to the seminary, and even when I was thinking about it, pretty much everyone was positive about it. My parents were very positive. I didn't get a lot of negative feedback. As a matter of fact, a lot of my friends started calling me Father James pretty early on. It's weird when your girlfriend calls you Father James. but generally it was positive. A lot of people didn't seem to quite get it. So it wasn't a negative reaction, more of a, well, whatever you want to do. It was more of just a different sort of reaction. But yeah, generally people were positive. One of my friends was, I'll never forget this, we were at a gathering, and he said, you know, Jamie, you're one of the smartest people I know. I don't understand why you'd throw your life away. That was really the only negative reaction that I had, but it did stick with me. I do remember that person saying that to me. I know that some of my friends were afraid that that they were going to never be able to speak to me again, or that they'd lose me. When I entered, that was right around the time that Harry Potter was becoming popular, and a few of my friends were convinced I was going to wizard school. And then once they saw the seminary, they were really convinced that I was going to wizard school. But, so yeah, generally it was positive. There actually was a bet of how long I'd stay in the seminary, everywhere from a month to 2 years. Only one of my friends said that I'd make it, but the general consensus was that if I made it more than 2 years or 4 years, some amount of time, that then I would continue. They just didn't think that I would last that long, so...